Meine Damen und Herren, auf den nächsten Vortragenden bin ich mir sicher, warten schon viele von Ihnen gespannt. Den Mann, den wir gleich hören werden, der ist einer der ganz großen Mediziner des 20. Jahrhunderts. Er hat maßgeblich zu den führenden Lehrbüchern im Bereich der Inneren Medizin beigetragen. Er hat über 1100 wissenschaftliche Publikationen verfasst und mit seinen Erkenntnissen um die Entstehung von Herzinfarkten vielen Menschen das Leben gerettet. Sie wissen alle, um wen es geht. Er wird gerade verkabelt und ich bitte zunächst einmal Gerald Maurer zu mir, Leiter der Universitätsklinik für Innere Medizin 2 zu mir, denn er ist mit dem nächsten Vortragenden gut befreundet. Herzlich willkommen. Einmal schön, dass Sie auch bei uns sind, Herr Maurer. Eugene Braunwald ist extra für den heutigen Tag aus den USA wieder in seine Geburtsstadt gekommen. Seit wann kennen Sie ihn und was schätzen Sie denn vor allem an ihm?
Also ich kenne ihn seit etwa 30 Jahren. Er wird sich vielleicht nicht an mich erinnern, wie ich als Jungkardiologe in Los Angeles anwesend war bei einer Ehrung an unserer Universität. Ich habe ihn dann Gott sei Dank besser kennenlernen dürfen und habe mich auch sehr gefreut, dass er immer wieder nach Wien gekommen ist. Und ich möchte nochmal betonen, was Sie gesagt haben. Eugene Braunwald ist sicherlich einer der bekanntesten und wichtigsten Mediziner der Welt, der sicherlich die Medizin des 20. und frühen 21. Jahrhunderts ganz wesentlich geprägt hat und in vielen Bereichen. Zunächst in der Forschung, sowohl Grundlagenforschung als auch klinische Forschung, aber auch in der Lehre. Sie haben von den Lehrbüchern gehört. Er hat viele Lehrbücher verfasst oder mit als Herausgeber beeinflusst. Besonders hervorheben möchte ich Harrisons Internal Medicine, das ist das Standardwerk der Inneren Medizin, und vor allem natürlich Braunwalds Textbook of Cardiology, also das führende Lehrbuch auf dem Gebiet der kardiovaskulären Medizin. Und ganz wesentlich ist es auch, dass er viele Karrieren und viele Menschen beeinflusst hat, positiv. Also ich habe viele Menschen schon über ihn sprechen gehört, von vielen Institutionen auf der ganzen Welt und auch von Harvard, also von seiner eigenen Institution. Ich habe eigentlich noch nie erlebt, dass man so einhellig in höchsten Tönen und nur positiv gesprochen hat. Und das ist wirklich beeindruckend. Also er hat viele Karrieren geprägt und Menschen geholfen, sich weiterzuentwickeln und natürlich mit seinen Forschungsergebnissen auch die Krankenbetreuung auf der ganzen Welt ganz wesentlich beeinflusst.
Also wir sind sehr, sehr stolz, dass er heute bei uns ist und wir dürfen gemeinsam jetzt nach vorne bitten. Herzlich willkommen und warm welcome to you, Eugene Braunwald.
Professor Maurer, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real honor for me to come here to Vienna, the city of my birth, and to celebrate with you the 10th anniversary of your medical university. And to think about how ancient higher education is in this country and in the city. 650 years ago was 100 years before Christopher Columbus sailed to what he thought was India and discovered North America. So this kind of tradition, obviously, we don't enjoy in the United States. So why should there be a medical university at all? We have very few. Actually, in the United States, only one. But the Republic of Austria has 3, and which is interesting. I think it makes a great deal of sense. When you consider not the medical school, but a medical center with all of its activities, it becomes larger and more difficult to manage than a university. So there is a joke that they tell in America, and the rector in our system is called the president. So the story is about two presidents of universities who die. And one goes to heaven and the other one goes to hell. When the president who goes to heaven is greeted by St. Peter, he asks St. Peter, well, what will I do here? And St. Peter says, you will be the president of a university, but you're in heaven because you don't have a medical school. The other president did some very bad things in his life, and he goes to hell, and he's greeted by the Satan, and he asked Satan, what will I be doing here? And Satan says, you will run a university. He says, that doesn't sound too bad. Satan says, wait a second, you will have 2 medical schools in that university. So I do think that there is a qualitative difference, although scholarship is at the basis of all of the subjects. There's a qualitative difference between medicine and the other faculties. An example would be the law school doesn't run the Supreme Court. That's not part of the law school. A music department doesn't put on great operas. They teach about operas, the law school teach about law and judges, but they don't do that, and so on and so forth. But the medical school, the clinical activities is the court of last resort. That's where patients come who have not gotten care, satisfactory care elsewhere, and they seek the most learned and most capable physicians and surgeons available. So that's, and of course the size of the enterprise. The teaching of interns and residents and fellows is just totally out of context with the other schools. Now, before March 11th, 1938, the medical school of the University of Vienna was one of the most distinguished in the world. When I began my clinical training at New York University in 1950, some of the most famous, outstanding professors at the university told us, the students, that it had been the custom in the 1920s and the 1930s for the most promising young academic physicians to come to Europe for a year. And high on the list, and at the top of the list, was the University of Vienna, because of the high quality and the fame of the university, the justified fame of the medical school, and also the cultural advantages of Vienna. So, as you know, after March 38, the school went through a very difficult period for a number of decades until fairly recently, and of course, the creation of the medical university 10 years ago has really wiped out the difficult decades of the past. So a medical school, whether it's a medical university or a medical school in a university, has 3 principal functions: the generation of new knowledge, namely the research; the transmission of knowledge, which is the training of medical students, residents; and third, the application of knowledge, and that is the practice of clinical medicine and surgery. In the United States, there is a 4th function, and that is the care of populations. And I think that that is less of an element here at this time. So what I'd like to do is I would like to talk to you about the first of these functions, namely research. Now, I think about biomedical research as a chain. And it's a chain that is composed of 3 links. The first link are the fundamental sciences. Sciences fundamental to medicine, like genetics, biochemistry, and it is microbiology, virology. That's one chain. The third chain, not the second, is the direct application of new findings, diagnostic and therapeutic, to patients. And that's usually done, that kind of research, extremely important, is conducted by well-trained specialists who nowadays also have training in, usually in biostatistics, because they study large numbers of patients. But between these two is a third link. It is medical science or translational science. There are a number of names that is this link. And its goal, the goal of translational scientists, is to take the most fundamental discoveries and to try to get an idea of how they can increase the understanding of disease and change the practice of medicine. Now, in this chain of 3 links, all 3 links are equally important. And the chain is just as strong, any chain is as strong as its weakest link. And I believe that at the present time, the weakest link in the chain is this middle link, the creation and the support of physician scientists. And I think that they have become an endangered species. And we have to think of them as endangered species, and that means that they need very, very special care, thoughtful care, and attention. Now, how has this come about? Why is this physician-scientist link, which seems like the obvious thing that people want to do in medicine? Well, the problem comes from what is demanded. What is demanded of physician-scientists? Simply put, they have to be trained as excellent physicians, and they have to be seen as excellent physicians. And they have to be trained in science, and they have to be considered to be excellent scientists. And this takes a long time. Now, in the United States, to train in, after medical school, after graduating with an MD degree, and if you want to train in internal medicine and a medical specialty, it takes about 6 years. And if you want to train in science and get to the point where you're a freestanding scientist who can create new knowledge, it takes also about 6 years. So the average age, excuse me, the average age at graduation from medical school in the US is 26. So you add 12 years to that, that's 38. Then you have a couple of years of being a junior faculty member, working under a more senior professor, and then you're 40 years old. And that's when you get started. Now your colleagues who decided to do something else instead of becoming physician scientists, by the time they reach their early 40s, they've reached the peak of their career. Usually have family responsibilities, and that makes the very long training effort a problem. In the United States, the first grant that people get from the NIH, MDs, is at the age of 44. So that means that's the median. Some get it as early as 41, and the other get it as late as 48. For a lot of people, their peak creativity period is over, because we know that creativity for scientists reaches its peak in the early 30s. So we have a training period where people's best years are behind them. Then physician scientists have the responsibility of staying abreast of new changes in both fields. We know that science moves extremely rapidly, and therefore a physician scientist who's not up to date on the newest things in science falls by the wayside. Of course, in the United States, although we are a rich country and the National Institutes of Health have an enormous budget, people have to basically earn their salaries. Maybe not from day one, but they don't have the assurance of having salaries for the remainder of their professional lives. And that is, they have to earn it either in medical practice or have their salaries supported by research grants. And so I think about that as the law of the jungle. Basically, you eat what you kill, and that is how they get along. So what do we do about that? We see that our younger people are reluctant to enter this field. It takes so much time. Success is very far distant, if at all, and there is insecurity about long-term salary. So I don't have a simple prescription for this, but I would say that what we have to do can be summarized very simply. It's shorter, 3 words, fewer and greater. Okay. By shorter, I mean the duration of training. We can't go on and have people take 10, 12, 15 years to train in being physician scientists. Much easier to be a scientist and train in 5 or 6 years. Much easier to be a clinician and train in 5 or 6 years. So we have to do something about that. And I think when I say that it requires special attention in a university, these people, we have the saying, special strokes for special folks. These are special folks, and the strokes that they require is to look at their curriculum and what can be eliminated, not adding anything, but looking at the education and see where we can cut something off. There are many rotations, for example, of interns and residents and fellows in their post-MD training, which are more service than education. And there are many periods in the medical school that can be reduced. And even research, there are a lot of periods that a research trainee does very routine things, and everybody says, well, this is good for them. Well, it's not good for them. It's good for the professor in the laboratory. But I think if you want to train a physician scientist, you have to do it faster. I think we can knock off 8 years, and that, I think, would be phenomenal. We also have to try to identify people at an earlier point in their careers. That can be done, I believe, by exposing medical students to a greater exposure of medical students to research. There will be a few that bubble up and say, this is for me. I'm excited by this. this is what I want to make my life. And then these are the people that you need to encourage. Of course, not all of them will, but many of them will come out. I think also the rigid separation that we have between research and clinical training, we have to break down that wall. So if you take a 50-year-old associate professor or professor who's a physician scientist, during the course of one day, he or she will be doing something in the laboratory or communicating with a technician in the laboratory or walking to the laboratory and spend some time, and also be seeing patients and caring for patients. Well, if the human mind can do that at the age of 50, I assure you it can also do that at the age of 25 or 30. And I've been involved first personally in programs that allowed me to do both. And then when I came to Harvard, I was able to establish programs like that, in which both research and clinical work were done within the same year, not within the same day. And it was been very exciting to see how rapidly people can learn both trades. It's like if you have a child, a very young child, that's at home and the parents speak two different languages. Well, that kid is going to grow up and speak two languages. And I think that is what we should be doing with our trainees as well. The second point that I wanted to make is better mentoring. The kind of advice we give to people who go into a career as physician scientists. I give you two examples. They're not real people, but they are not unreal either. So the first one is a person trained in basic genetics and also in internal medicine who becomes a general internist and also a yeast geneticist. Well, these two activities have nothing to do with each other. It's very, very hard to see how each would influence the other. I think, and I've seen this, this is a prescription for failure. Because for a physician scientist to be successful, the two things that they do, namely research and clinical, they have to be mutually reinforcing. So the opposite example is a physician scientist who has been trained in the cloning of cell surface receptors and channels, and his clinical or her clinical training is in treating patients with arrhythmias, clinically and in the clinical electrophysiology laboratory. Now, the chances for that person to be successful are much greater because there is a bidirectional flow. I mean, we think about bench to bedside being important, and it certainly is. Namely, seeing something at the bench and taking it to the bedside. But I believe what's even more important, and certainly have experienced that myself, is bedside to bench. So this theoretical electrophysiologist, clinical electrophysiologist, comes across some patients with a certain electrocardiographic change, subject to very serious arrhythmias, then goes back to the laboratory and finds the channel that's responsible for the ion flow that's disordered, and then takes that back to the bedside. And I think we do not give our young physician scientists enough good advice. Because if we did, then we would be oversubscribed because of the excitement. The next thing we have to talk to them about is the relationships between academia and industry. And how do you fashion that relationship? It's a complicated matter. First, I think we have to recognize that great universities cannot produce drugs. They can't produce devices. There has to be a partnership between academia and industry. So if you're going to be a physician scientist and you want to do something that will really change the care of patients, improve the care of patients, then you have to find a way of working with industry. Now, of course, that has certain risks. But what we need to tell our aspiring and young physician scientists is that by and large, scientists and administrators who work in industry are just as honest and just as dedicated to moving medicine forward than people in academia. But that doesn't mean they're the same. There is a difference. People who work in industry, their final goal is to improve the financial condition of their company, whether it's the value of the stock or whatever. That's why they're there, and they're there to do that in the most honest possible way. And I think that's what we should recognize. That they do it, but they have a slightly different goal. They want this drug to work, and they want it to work for patients, and they want it to be a big seller. And in academia, our goal should be the search for truth, however the results of the trial show. Whether it's a positive trial or negative trial, doesn't matter. You want to get the right answer. So this causes some of the tension between academia and industry. And I think we have to stop the kind of feeling that the bargain with industry, the partnership with industry, is a Faustian bargain. I think it's important for physician scientists to have relationships with industry. It's very important. I wouldn't say essential, but it's almost essential for their success. But they need to be very careful and not have it with one company. If they have it with one company over a prolonged period of time, it becomes, the line between academia and industry becomes blurred. And that's where things sometimes go wrong. Of course, some people in academia then join industry. They join industry and they say, well, it's very exciting, I can do this in an industrial laboratory, and then after a while I'll come back to academia. Never happens. It never happens. The flow is in one direction. But I think we have to remember what has come out of industrial laboratories. In my field of cardiology, the most important drugs, beta blockers, antihypertensives, ACE inhibitors, and statins were all developed in industry. Now, some of the ideas for that development came from chemistry, they came from academic sciences, but they were done in companies. And several of them were rewarded with Nobel Prizes appropriately. So I don't think that we should stick our noses up very high and look down on these people. We must not. We just have to create a proper balance. And then I think we need to emphasize the enormous reward for a physician scientist. I think there is no greater reward than to use one's intellect, what one has learned in science, and actually be able to apply that to help a patient or to help patients whom you may never see. There might be thousands of people. And I think that that is a most rewarding experience. And I think that there's a lot of negative information, at least in the United States right now, from faculty who are physician scientists who are finding it very tough to go forward. And that is transmitted to the younger generation. I think that has to stop. We have to tell it like it is. Namely, we have to tell them that there's no greater joy that can come than being able to use your intellect to help patients. Now, physician scientists are, as I've said, are very special individuals, and to develop them, it takes very special institutions. And I think the Medical University of Vienna is a very special institution. And so I would congratulate you on the tremendous achievements during your first 10 years. And I wish you well during the next 10 years. And you know what, I'm looking at that as the life of a person. A lot of things happen in the first 10 years. But the most interesting things happen to people in their next decade. So thank you very much for giving me the honor of addressing you. I look forward to continued interaction with colleagues at the university. Thank you.